I just remember sitting down with the textbook and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to read it. And that's going to be how I'm going to study. And we're just going to, we're going to do fine because that seems like a reasonable idea. And it did not end up being a reasonable idea. I did poorly on the test. And I think sort of that was where the connection of like harder does not equal smarter. Harder can just equal nothing when it comes to a study process being ineffective. I remember sitting down in the student lounge or wherever I was and being so proud of like the hard work I was putting in and then having zero to show for it.
Welcome to episode 94 of the CPA Exam Experience podcast from SuperfastCPA. I'm Nate, and today you're going to hear me talk with Brian. So a few weeks ago, out of the blue, I got an email from Brian, and I looked back, and we had never exchanged emails before. And his email said, "Hey, just thought I'd send you a quick message that I used your products and went 4 for 4 on the exams. I started off for 2 weeks on reg, just doing the studying in Becker like they suggest, realized that I was getting nowhere, and in my search for a study methodology, came across SuperfastCPA. I'm very grateful for your product, both the study tools and the study framework and the mindset. Sincerely, Brian." So, of course, I emailed him back and said, "Okay, that sounds like you got a good story to share. Would you want to be on our podcast?" So we set up a time, got on a call, and in this interview, you're going to hear Brian's story about how he went 4 for 4 on the CPA exams, the big differences in those first 2 weeks that he mentioned when he realized, okay, this is going to consume my life if I study this way, and I feel like it's not even working. So then he looks around online, finds SuperfastCPA somehow, starts by watching one of our free study training webinars, and point after point was just making a lot of sense to him about how to study differently and more efficiently. And 5 months later, he's gone 4 for 4 on his CPA exams. So Brian just has a ton of insights and wisdom to share, things that he learned from the pro course strategies that he applied, and we pretty much just go through exactly his daily process from start to finish, how he used multiple choice questions as his main learning tool instead of the video lectures and the text, and just what he did differently to get such good results in a pretty short amount of time without it taking over his entire life. So before we get into the interview, I just want to mention 2 things. First, the free study training webinars that we do, that is where Brian started. That is where all the ideas clicked, or that's where he was exposed to the ideas. So if you have not watched one of those yet, that will give you multiple aha moments or light bulbs going off as to, okay, that rings true because I sit there and do that and feel like it's not doing anything. Do this instead. And there's at least 5 to 7 of those things that we cover in those free trainings that will transform your study process for the better, let you really spend less time staring at your review course every day, and get better results with your study process in less time. So to sign up for one of those, go to our main site at SuperfastCPA.com. It's the main thing at the top of the homepage, or the link to that will be in the description in the YouTube video or the podcast episode. The second thing is our free podcast giveaway. So each month we give away 3 pairs of Powerbeat Pro headphones to go along with our audio notes. It's kind of the idea with our audios. You can get through the audios from start to finish in 2 to 3 days of just listening to them in the little chunks throughout your day. When you're preparing meals, when you're getting ready for work in the morning, when you're driving to work, or whenever you're in your car, when you're walking your dog or exercising. So to sign up for that giveaway, go to SuperfastCPA.com/enter, or again, that link will also be in the description of this episode, either in the podcast app or on YouTube. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the interview with Brian. So you found the podcast first.
I think it was the podcast and then it was the webinar.
Okay.
Maybe listened to an episode or 2 and it sounded obviously very good, and then the webinar was very helpful as well, and then yeah, all the rest of it.
Awesome. Okay. So starting from the beginning, how long were you studying for the CPA before you came across our podcast, or just us in general?
2 awful weeks. And I say that just because they felt like such a tremendous waste of time. Waking up, early because I was already going to do it early, but I was waking up and watching. I was using Becker and like listening to lectures and falling asleep at 5:45 in the morning. Just felt like such an amazing waste of time. And I think sort of after the 2-week mark, I realized that nothing that I was doing at that point was being retained. So that sort of led to the search of, well, how do people actually, I'm sure that people have documented how to pass these. So then it kind of went on a search and fortunately came across your stuff, SuperfastCPA stuff.
Yeah. I just wanted to read your email real quick. Let me pull that up.
Sure.
I love getting emails like that.
I love writing emails like that.
Yeah. Because I think I said it back to you after that first email. I said something like, from my point of view, that's a common thing. I'll get a thank you email from someone that, like, their name doesn't sound familiar, and I'm pretty sure we've never emailed back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then I'll look, and that's the case. And just some of our best success stories, purchase everything, just follow everything, watch the pro videos, execute the process, and pass. And I'm sure that half of those I never even hear from at all. So I'm glad you emailed me.
Well, I'm super happy to do so. And one of the reasons was, I've seen, so I work in public accounting, and I've seen a lot of people that have really struggled with the CPA exam process. Not that it wasn't a struggle on my end as well. But I've seen a lot of people just sort of have that be their primary goal and have it go by the wayside because their study. I have to say, because I don't feel like, I feel like they're all very smart people, but yeah. I've heard about some weird study practices that where they're like, I watch all the videos and read the book and in my head, I'm not like, I don't know. I would just want people to have the same experience that I had with it. And a lot of it had to do with your stuff, honestly.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. And we'll get into all that. But yeah, that's very true. Some of the smartest people that I worked with, I'm thinking of like 3 specific people. Like when I was new in public accounting, there were 3 seniors that work-wise, like actually doing the job each day. Mm-hmm. You just could tell they were like 3 of the smartest people that I worked with, but they also hadn't got their CPA. And then you kind of hear their backstory that they had really like struggled with the CPA and were putting it off, and it turned into like 4 or 5 years of putting it off type thing. And so it happens all the time, exactly like that.
Sounds like a real true nightmare.
Yeah. Okay, so your email, you out of the blue, you said, hey, just thought I'd send you a quick message that I used your products, went 4 for 4 on the exams. I started off for 2 weeks on reg, doing the normal studying in Becker like they suggested, realized I was getting nowhere. In my search for a study methodology, came across Superfast. Yeah. So let's start there. You mentioned the 2 weeks. So I'm guessing for those 2 weeks, when you first get Becker, you log in and just start watching the lectures, highlighting the chapter like they kind of have you do. Mm-hmm. What was your study process like, in your words, for those 2 weeks?
For those 2 weeks, I think it was watching the video and doing just what you said, watching the videos and highlighting along and trying to use their mnemonics and acronyms for things. And I think a few times I would get to the end of it and look back on it and just sort of have a suspicion that nothing good was happening in my brain. That I think that sums up those 2 weeks pretty well.
Okay. I've got so many emails over the years from... That's one of the big like tragedies about the CPA exams is there's a lot of people out there that are very dedicated and disciplined, and they're putting in like 4 or 5 hours a day of that process, and then it's just not translating, and it turns into like a year, maybe even 2 or 3 years. That they're in, where your story was 2 weeks long before you thought, I don't think this is actually working. Like there's a lot of people that do that for years. And so that was going to be my question, was what specifically made you think this isn't really working? Did you take like a little test lit on the topics you'd covered, or what made you think this is not doing anything?
Well, there's actually a very specific reason why, and it was maybe one of my more humbling experiences in undergrad, where I remember one of the first tests I had to take, I think it was chemistry or biology, and I don't know how I had not learned how to study at that point in my life, but I just remember sitting down with the textbook and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to read it, and that's going to be how I'm going to study, and we're just going to, we're going to do fine because that seems like a reasonable idea. And it did not end up being a reasonable idea. I did poorly on the test, and I think sort of that was where the connection of like harder does not equal smarter. Harder can just equal nothing when it comes to a study process being ineffective. And I think I just had flashbacks during those first 2 weeks of that time, because I remember sitting down in the student lounge or wherever I was and being so proud of like the hard work I was putting in, and then having zero to show for it.
Yeah.
I mean, not zero. I didn't get a 0 on it, but I definitely wasn't a good score. So
yeah.
That.
No, that's a good point. I mean, it's an interesting point too, because I think maybe a lot of people become attached to how much work they've put in, and so they don't want to maybe admit like my last 3 months of studying, I just need to completely tear it down and start a different process just because of the amount of time they put in. Yeah. Okay, so you come across our podcast or the free training. If you can remember anything specific, what was maybe the big idea, or if it was like 2 or 3 ideas, what's something you heard on either the podcast or the free training that really made sense to you and made you start to see the study process differently?
I would say probably the fact that there was a daily re-review component to it.
Okay.
And the vast majority of sort of the primary morning bulk study session was doing multiple choice questions, because that, as you well know, of course, is what the CPA exams consist of, or they're about half thereof, and it just makes sense to do the thing that practice the way that you got to compete.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. There's not a whole lot of theory behind that. I just remember when I took FAR the first time, and I failed FAR once. I mean, I failed it that first time, but sitting in the exam, just realizing like, holy cow, I spent so much time just watching these videos, and then there's all these like relatively simple questions that I didn't spend a ton of time just going through questions, but that's what that's what the test day consists of. So yeah, it's once you say it and just realize it, it just seems so obvious to like spend most of your study time doing what you'll be doing on test day. So
definitely makes sense. And I'm no neuroscientist or anything like that, but I imagine that the recall component of I guess solving things and having to produce information as opposed to just take in information and hope that you'll be able to produce it when the time comes is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there is exactly. I like butcher the explanation when I try it, but there is this official term for it called like retrieval learning, and it's by far the most effective way they've figured out. And there's something to that, like to see a question and click on something and it reveals the answer, and it's that whole thing of like I guess we could call it presentation format or textbook format, where all the information's laid out, versus trying to learn it in chunks of just kind of that quiz format. There's just something about learning in question format that's just much more effective. So
I believe it.
Yeah. So once you got our course, I'm assuming you went in and watched the pro videos.
I did the entirety of it. The pro videos. I mean, did all of them, did the activities involved. The behavioral component was something that I liked a lot, sort of getting to the emotional driver of what it would mean to pass the CPA exams. I found that to be a very beneficial activity. And I don't know. It just seemed like there were a lot of things about your program that just seemed like they made sense. They kind of resonated with things that made sense in my own mind. Like, it would be helpful to understand the emotional drivers of why this is important to me. And it does make sense to, just do a bunch of questions over and over again. And it does make sense to re-review things on a regular basis. So it just, I say that as if I came up with it on my own, which I clearly didn't. I was fortunate enough to come across your teaching methodologies, and I'm super grateful for them. So anyway.
No, I mean, I love hearing that. Not from like a, what do you call it, vanity point of view, but just the fact that it just helps people make this process that for a lot of people is a complete nightmare. It makes it relatively simple. I mean, it's still a lot of work, and you have to execute the whole process every day, but I think it does just makes it a lot more simple, and it makes the study process itself just less overwhelming. So from your first 2 weeks, you go through the pro course. What was the main difference in, okay, let's say you sit down on week 3, after you've watched the pro course, how did your study process change, and what did you spend your morning study session doing?
So I think because I was terrified of reg, that I really wanted to follow the details of your program as closely as I could. So I think that for the first few months, it was 2 hours, like legit. It didn't stay that way all the way through, but 2 hours legit of 90 minutes of multiple choice questions, and then, not 30 minutes of re-review immediately because I didn't have anything to re-review yet. Mm-hmm. But just creating the study plan first, sort of picking out a date, figuring out how many modules and things need to get through on a time frame, and then having a plan. And that was pretty key too, because there was an element of hopelessness with just opening up Becker's online, and it was like their fanciest product or whatever. Becker, don't come after me. Your product's great. Like, just like guys are gonna show up at my house. It's a great program and everything, but it's just like it's so much, and they're just like, here's 50 hours of videos for this first 1/8 of reg, and here's a giant textbook, and here's all these questions. It's like, what do I do with this?
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the general overwhelm, that's straight from the I mean, this is just universal, whether someone realizes it or not, is the 3 big issues someone will have with the study process is finding the time to study. So it's like time, overwhelm, and retention. Overwhelm is probably the thing that most people say is like the number one, is just it's like a literal library of information when you sign up for a review course. Yes, it's all in there in lessons in a linear format, but once someone starts going through it and they see how long one lesson takes and how many lessons there are after that, this sense of overwhelm sets in.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying, and I don't want to say demoralizing. Seems like I'm being dramatic, but it is a little bit. It's like, how can anybody ever get through that version of it? And I'm sure there are. I mean, I have no doubt that there are, but
yeah. There's those Elijah Sells Award winners that get a 99 on every section. That's not what our thing's about. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Good for those guys and everything, guys and gals and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for them.
Yep.
Yeah, going back to your daily process, so you just started with you would do the questions, and then once you'd been through a few lessons, so you had stuff to re-review, you would do the re-review. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically you just followed the pro course format, and then how about our study tools? Would you use those throughout the day, or how did you kind of use those in your process?
I used the audio notes heavily because I had about a 35-minute commute each way to actually I've had about that commute the entire time that I was using SuperfastCPA, and so I would every day, just like you said to do, just start it from the beginning, play the lessons. It'd be hard. Sometimes I'd forget which lesson I was on, so I'd have to start at some random point, but just over and over every day on my commute, just because it kind of feels good to add that time if I'm just sort of thinking about, or if I was thinking about how much time I'd put in on a day, like 2 hours becomes 3 hours if you include that, and then you include the other thing, which is the mini quiz. I use those throughout the day as well. So then, I mean, you start getting up into thinking about that it's like, 3.5 hours a day that you're at least being exposed to it, if not in the entirety of recall, but mostly that, and then just listening things like you mentioned, lyrics getting stuck in your head, and then as it goes on, connections are, you listen to a lesson for the 5th time, and because you've gone over that lesson in Becker, then it just clicks on sort of a different level, I guess. So I found that to be very helpful.
Yeah, yep. I would say that's the main benefit of audio. It's while you're driving or whatever, it's easy to, I don't know, maybe consciously zone out, but that exposure, like something is happening there, and I think that kind of it just kind of builds in layers the more you listen to it just over and over and over, that repeat exposure. Yeah, that's again, like you said, we're not neuroscientists, so I can't really put it into words, but it's definitely, there's an effect to that just doesn't happen from just doing your main study session all by itself.
Agreed.
Okay, and so you were a morning studier, and so how about did that just kind of allow you to take the evenings off, or did you do kind of light review in the evenings, or was that the entirety of your process, or what'd you do in the evenings, if anything?
I tried to allow that time for social interactions, I guess you could call them. So time for a significant other, which, we're doing these, we're taking these exams, and we're, what would we call it, investing in our future, but, our significant others are still there, and they deserve time and everything too, right? So it made sense, like, we can wake up and then do all this throughout the day and have 3 hours or so of studying or more put in by the time you get home, and it just seemed very efficient. Yeah.
Also, I would say it's almost, on other episodes maybe you've heard me say this, but if your life is you wake up, go straight to work, and then you try to force yourself to study for 4 or 5 hours at night, that's kind of your entire life, and your life gets pretty miserable real fast if that's what every day is.
I do recall you saying that, and that sounds absolutely correct. Even if, I don't know how people get home from work and are not just brain dead, because I would get off work from auditing all day, and I'm not like, all right, let's go solve some math problems. It's like
exactly. Yep. Yeah, and people sometimes in emails, they want me to like they'll say that they're like, I just really can't get myself to get up early, but I feel like my brain is mush, so how can I study for these? And it's just kind of like, well, I don't know, you want me to like just say it, like you have to get up early, then that's what you have to do. Like, how bad do you want to pass these? Oh, and I was on that note, you mentioned the kind of getting your reasons. Were you referring to the little worksheet that's part of the pro course where you actually write out, like, these are the good things that are going to happen if I pass the exams, and these are the bad things or the things that won't change if I don't?
Yes, that is what I'm referring to.
Okay. Yeah, I like when people mention that too, because I don't know, I'm so into that kind of stuff, writing out goals, and I just, like, if you don't have a concrete thing, like why you're doing these daily steps of stuff that's not that pleasurable, it's just never gonna, you're not gonna move towards it. And so you kind of have to have stuff like that.
It reminds me of a book, and I'm going to forget which book it is. I think it might be called Switch or something like that. And there's a metaphor about, I think it's of, I don't know if it's specifically a behavior change, but it's a metaphor of the elephant, the rider, and the path. And I'm probably going to just butcher this, but what I remember from it is that the emotional drivers are sort of the elephant. It's like the real heavy hitting component of what makes a behavior change occur. And the rider is sort of the intellectual component that gives that elephant direction. But without having access to that emotional side, then behavior change is just it's just drastically weaker. And
Yeah.
so at least, and I was a personal trainer for about a decade or so, and behavior change was something near and dear to my heart. So that again resonated because, emotional drivers are just everything. So when that came up, I was like, this is excellent. I'm going to absolutely do this.
Yeah, no, that is a good, I have heard that vaguely, but yeah, that is a great point. And yeah, the logic is the guy sitting on an elephant, and they only have so much control over where the elephant really wants to go. Obviously, that's a good analogy. And then,
so whoever wrote that book, I'm citing you right now with on as best I can.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I say that in those free trainings is I start talking about motivation at some point or finding your why. And I point that out. I'm like, if you haven't started the study process, this might sound like, just kind of a stupid or meaningless, like, why is he talking about motivation? But if you're a few weeks into the process, you'll become real familiar with how hard it is to get yourself to sit down to study for 4 hours every day if you feel like you're not making progress, or, it's just, motivation becomes a very salient topic in this whole process. And what about your weekends? Did you just what was your study process on the weekends?
I kind of stuck to a similar thing. Like I would sort of toward the end, or maybe sort of the last 50 or 60% of all of them, I would start to incorporate some simulations. But it'd mainly be either just chowing down on a bunch more multiple choice questions and trying to get ahead a little bit, or if I had gotten behind for some reason, catching up, because I know in one of your videos you mentioned never start a Monday behind your study schedule, and I made sure to never let that be the case throughout all 4 of them. Fortunately, I don't know what allowed that to be the case, but I remember there was one time it was really close, and I had to put in like an 8-hour day on a Sunday, but in my mind I was like, no, you can't break this now. It's nothing but bad mojo to do that at this point.
Yeah, no, that's the kind of stuff that is the difference. I mean, like you said, you went 4 for 4, and the strategies aside, it's just that kind of thinking. Like, nope, I'm not going to break the protocol or whatever you want to call it. So that's awesome.
It was a crappy Sunday, but
right,
that's fine.
Yep. How about because this is a thing people ask constantly. So the simulations specifically, so you said you start incorporating those. What was your actual process? Would you just generate several random simulations and try to solve them and then reverse engineer them kind of like the same way you would use multiple choice questions, or what was your actual process for the practice sims?
So I personally found I would do some where I would just kind of generate a couple and then have no idea what was going on, and then look at the answer and being like, well, I wonder where that answer is in one of the 6 windows they want me to open right now. So when I would be learning a new topic, I wouldn't use those because it just felt a little bit like I would just be more of a needle in a haystack kind of a feel than I would desire. But sort of toward the end of any particular exam, I found that they were very useful for reinforcing topics because they would, they'd ask it in a different way. And it was also, I mean, as you of course know, is one of the things they test is you actually have to do some of those. So they were a good tool, but they're man, I have strong opinions about those simulations. I think those things are malicious. I don't know who is what. You use the term professional hazing, and man, when you're in a timed exam and you open a simulation with 8 tabs on it, that's just mean spirited. But I mean, of them, of course. But
Yeah.
Whatever. It's good. They're testing our knowledge and all that, or whatever.
Yeah. So you're talking about the document review simulation specifically. So in your, let's say, I don't know, if you had an 8-week timeline for a section and you start practicing or using practice sims halfway through, if you generated random sims and one of them or 2 of them were document review, you would just kind of skip those and then kind of use those specifically at the end of your study process. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. And I think one of the reasons is that they're like, a lot of what felt like the heavy lifting in those was just breaking the data apart and figuring out what they're actually trying to ask, as opposed to sort of reinforcing the topics. Not that it's not that as well. And again, it's a super important skill set, so they're important to practice. I thoroughly believe. But it just, at least from my perspective, I kind of felt like they were tapping into a lot of mental bandwidth. And, as I'm sure everybody who goes through this process feels like, mental bandwidth is a precious resource, and trying to use it as. And again, I am not a fan of those sims, but I'm sure a lot of people like them.
Yeah, somewhere
I
out
hang
there.
out with those people, but I'm sure a lot of people like them.
Yeah, that's funny. I saw there was a TikTok video recently. Just this guy, obviously, it's like a skit thing where he was like an advocate of the IRS and just had this whole. It went pretty viral. I don't know if you saw it, but it was pretty.
I haven't. Sounds pretty funny.
How about your process for creating your own flashcards, or if you had a alternate way of taking notes? Did you have some form of putting things that you struggled with in your own words?
I used flashcards. I used the Brainscape app.
Okay.
Which was just a free note card app. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Brainscape is what I used. Yep. And then more recently, I've been recommending Quizlet. At some point, I think they tried to make it paid only, and then so for a while, I started telling people, "Well, use this other one." But yes, back when I did this, I used Brainscape. So, how did you decide what to make a flashcard for? Like how to take the time? Because that's another thing I get asked a lot, and it's in the pro videos. When you go through a lesson the first time, a lot of the terminology or concepts or formulas will seem new. So a lot of people think or feel like they want to make a flashcard for everything. And in the pro videos, I say, for the most part, you want to wait until the sets of 30, because you want to just naturally see what are things that you keep missing questions on 2 or 3 or 4 times in a row. And that's what you should make a flashcard for. But so anyways, what was your process of deciding if something was worth your time to make a flashcard on or not?
Pretty much exactly that. I don't know how much you remember about Becker. You probably know everything about all these. But anyway, in the sort of quiz or test generator, you'll get a multiple choice question, and it'll tell you how many times you've missed it, or like how many times it'll show what if you got it right the last time. And it would just be kind of a good indicator when I see one that's like, you've missed this 4 in a row. And I'd be like, well, that's aggravating. And so that would be the ones that I would try to take a flashcard on. I kind of use those not maybe as much as I should, because I found the flashcards to be, they were like, it's a grouping of the hardest topics that I have trouble remembering. So I'd kind of study those sparingly because it would make me sad or whatever. Not
Yeah.
But I still did use them. I remember I used them pretty heavy in reg because.
And so you don't work in tax, I'm just guessing from how you're
I do not work
describing
in tax.
reg. Yeah. That was the same as me. I worked in audit and wasn't a huge fan of reg, so.
No.
Okay, so leading from the flashcards, and then for your final review and or if you did it differently, did you utilize kind of the what do we call it? The mega cram session, the final 48 hours of review?
I did. I definitely went a little bit heavier, but I wouldn't say I went crazy with it. I just sort of maybe did like I did a lot of the however many multiple choice is part of that particular CPA exam, that many multiple choice and 2 sims. And just that was sort of my ratio for whatever reason. I think I found that was sort of my tolerance for sims. I get through a couple of them that would take, whatever, an hour or something. Or however, I mean, I'm sure other people do them faster than I do. But, and then so the mega cram, I guess, sessions, I would probably do that twice. Or if I think on one of them, I maybe did it 3 times, like 30 and then 2 sims, 30 multiple choice, then 2 sims. And if I was feeling real frisky, I'd do another 30 and 2. But
yeah,
but I only think I did that once.
And that's one of those things where doing all these interviews, there are these kind of core components that kind of have to be part of the process, but then stuff like that, people just kind of customize and, it just, if you're passing sections, it's just working. Whatever you're doing is working. So,
well, that's sort of how I felt about it when I got, because I was terrified. I was confident that I wasn't going to pass the first one. And then, the first one went okay. And it's like, well, this must be working on some level. So let's just steer into it. But I would hear people that you have on there, and they'd say the amount of time that they'd study. I don't know if you, and they were like, yeah, I studied for 12 hours on the weekend. I'm like, man, those are some tough people.
Right.
Tougher than me.
Yeah. There's definitely, if someone asks, like in an email or something, I usually tell them I wouldn't really study more than 8 hours in one day. Like 8 would be just the max, just because there's diminishing returns. And again, I can't describe factually or accurately how our short-term memory works, but there just seems to be, it's like a pitcher and it just can only get so full, seems like. So
seems fair.
Yeah. So how about your test day experience with reg? You said you were scared of reg. You weren't comfortable with the content, but you go in there. You've been following the process. So what actually happened? Were you rushing to finish, or did you finish early, or how did just test day go?
I was rushing to finish. I managed my time. I think I managed my time poorly in all of them. Particularly poorly in reg. Not that I ran out of time, but I definitely spent too much time on the first few sections and was running out of time. And that sort of informed some of the later, like taking the 30 into multiple choice and sim, because I would start actually doing what a reasonable person would do and figure out how much time I had to do those on the actual test day, and then try and kind of speed things up a little bit when I had to. But I'm a kind of person that takes all the time on every test you take. So
yeah, but again, you passed all 4, and so were you surprised when you got your reg score and you had passed? Did you leave the testing center thinking that, like, I'm sure I failed that, or did you feel like that could have gone either way?
I mean, I just feel like the CPA exams are just emotionally violent, and I left the test just being like, what just happened? I didn't feel like I passed it, but at the same time, I had no idea, because they grade it again in these ways where it's tiered. If you do okay, they're like, oh, you think you're having a good time? How about these? And then so you leave there after just having a bunch of hard questions asked you, and it's just like, I don't know, I felt all mixed up.
Yeah, man, that is funny. Emotionally violent. Like when you say some horror stories from your firm, I mean, I have got emails from people that, I mean, this like really like affected their life in a big way, like a negative way, over the course of like 5, sometimes 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like marriages in a couple cases, just because, like I said, if someone's working all day, and then you get the type of person that is very dedicated, and like at some point they start putting their like self-worth on the line over these, and so they won't give up, but it's just not working, and this lasts for 5 years, and they're trying to stay married at the same time. I've just had some actual horror story emails. So,
well, that sounds truly awful, but also very understandable, because I mean, as you know, and probably everybody who's listening to this podcast knows, that everybody in your life knows that you're taking them, and it's like a lot of pressure, and it's like, at least I don't know, I kind of internalized that pressure, and I mean, it definitely added to it. It's like, if we're going to spend time on something and sacrifice our relationships and things we care about, then there needs to be some type of strategy behind it, as opposed to like Becker's, here's 1,000 pages of information, have fun kind of.
Yeah.
No offense, Becker, appreciate you.
Yeah, no, it is. It's that's the whole thing. Like, you have to be strategic. This has to lead to a passing score, or there's not really another way of saying it. It's just a gigantic waste of time and money. So
yeah, it's a waste of time and money, and then I'll say embarrassment. Like there's like that sucks to even say, but it's like, I mean, it's our profession that's on the line, our sort of reputation in our job. Like, not entirely, but a little bit.
Right. And then at the same time, like we've helped so many people, somebody that has struggled for maybe 5 years, sometimes 10 years, and we just point out some of these strategies, and that same person with the same brain passes all 4 in the next 6 months or a year after not being able to pass for 5 years. So it is not like an IQ test. It's purely a matter of like your strategy being effective or not. That's all it is.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't want to take up much more of your time. So the final question I always ask is, even if it's something we already covered, if you look back at your own process, what would you say to people that are currently studying? What would be like your top 3 tips?
I would say develop a timeline. So pick a date out that is, I don't know, appropriate. I guess if somebody's their first one, they don't know what that would be, but some 6 to 10 weeks, somewhere in that range, and just mow through the material. Like, just, you need to get through, you divide it, you have 8 sections and 6 subsections, you know how many, you can just do the math and divide it and see how many you need to get through, and the new portion of your review. Never skip the re-review part, even if it's less than 30. There would be a lot of mornings I would do 30, but then sometimes I'd sleep a little bit later, and I'd only have time to do 15 or 20. But then the other thing is just, I would guess if I had to say 3 is, at least for me personally, view where is every possible moment that I could be reinforcing this material, because I do not want to fail one of these. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
So that's why where your products again came in, the audio notes, because I didn't find any audio notes anywhere else that seemed, I don't think I saw any of them anywhere. I'm sure they existed, but yours were succinct enough where it felt like it mirrored sort of the timeline of, like, in the process of studying, I could get through it 8 times or 10 times the audio notes. And then also the quizzes, like you make them simple enough so that we don't need a calculator, and we can get through them while I'm microwaving a burrito or whatever I'm doing. And I'm a believer in your product, man. I'm a fan. I am a unabashed fan of what you have done, and I appreciate it. I don't know if I answered your question or not. But.
No, yeah, you did, and you made a great soundbite, so I appreciate that, and I'm glad it was so helpful. And mostly, there is just there's been, we've done like 100 of these interviews now. We haven't published all 100. We published like 90 something now, but there is a direct correlation. When someone is, as they're describing their strategies, they're essentially repeating back like the pro course to me on these interviews. So it's like clear that you watched all the videos, you understood like this is like the process from start to finish. It's just very highly correlated that those people passed with relatively no struggles. So I kind of just appreciate the big picture you've painted here. So.
Well, I appreciate both the course, and I guess maybe one other message to those people is when I started this, I felt pretty hopeless. Like this was such a daunting task, and now that it's over, it just seems like how can this be? It's almost kind of surreal, but it's just, I think that's one of the good parts of what you provide the path as well. You provide something that is not present, or at least as I saw it elsewhere, a path, and that to me was invaluable because it allowed the doubt that was kind of starting to really eat at my mind to just be shut up for a second. Like, shut up, doubt.
Yeah.
Because you're following something, and for better or worse, if it didn't work, then you could tweak it, or I could tweak it or whatever, but it did work. And then so that, I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I'm glad it helped so much. So yeah, we've kind of gone through everything. So when did you get your fourth passing score? Oh, just after you emailed me, right? Yeah.
A week ago. It was awesome time. Kind of, again, more surrealism, but yeah.
Yeah, I know it. The relief. Like you say, like you might not say like the happiest moment of your life, but in terms of just relief, there's nothing that's compared to that so far. Just the biggest relief ever, getting your fourth passing score.
True.
All right, Brian. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. These are just very valuable. I mean, for credibility for us, but also just, other people listening to these. So I appreciate you taking the time, and congrats on being done.
Oh, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you made this product and reach more people. Let me know how I can help, whatever, because you're doing, in my opinion, a good thing here. So thank you.
Awesome. All right, so that was the interview with Brian. I'm sure you found that very helpful and insightful and inspiring. When you take somebody who has previously struggled, and not in Brian's case, but sometimes for years, and we can just help them improve or tweak their study process and make a few of the small right tweaks, everything changes, and a lot of times they go 4 for 4, or if they've struggled for years, they end up passing all 4 within the next 6 to 8 months. So this process is all about your strategies, your daily study process, and how strategic every minute that you spend studying is. So again, the best place for you to start to learn how to do that from start to finish is one of those free study training webinars. The link will be down in the description, and then you might as well also sign up for our free podcast giveaway while you're at it. That link will be in the description as well. So if you found this episode helpful, send it to someone you know who's also working on their CPA exams. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.